I mean, I've got a mate who farms down on the York Peninsula, fantastic land, and they just keep on buying it, and they say, I know next year this land's going to be worth, you know, so much more than what it was last year, and they have. They just kept on going, and there's this fantastic capital appreciation. I'm far from confident that's where we end up. But these sort of systems, I don't know where the system's going to be in 50 years' time or 20 years' time even. With climate change, whatever, I don't know where we're going to face some major transformational change within the landscape. I don't think anybody does. What I do know is that this farming environment here will be doing something in 20 years' time or 50 years' time. May not be what we look at now, and if we do face transformational change, we may face really substantial declines in our land value. If we suddenly have to go to a salt bush-based sheep system or something, I don't know. You know, suddenly we get, I'll show you some figures in a minute about it. Suddenly we get significant increases in temperature, and we can't grow crops in the spring, too hot in the spring. You know, in that situation, we need assets off farm. I think the really important thing about the strategic stuff that I'm talking about is that it is in a constant state of change and in evolution. And just a couple of things that I think have shown that. Direct drilling is a classic development of this strategy. And what direct drilling has done in this environment is allowed us to, number one, handle scale better, so we can get out there and sow a crop very quickly. The second thing it's done is it allows us to sow crops a lot earlier. And I'll show you something here about early seeding. I mean, this is just, you know, all this stuff, but this is the graph of spring temperature anomaly in South Australia. And so since about, you know, the mid-70s through to this, we've basically seen an increase in spring temperature of about, what, 1.5 degrees or something like that. And if we look at that, looking at the average timing of the first 30-degree day in spring across the decades, here at Orroroo, the average 30-degree day in the 60s was October 19th. You can see there's a real significant trend there. We're getting the average 30-degree spring day about 2 weeks earlier than we used to, and I did the same figures for Port Germain. It's about the same. And this spring temperature is really driving our yields. It's just as soon as there's almost a direct relationship between poor yield results and high spring temperatures. And so, you know, direct drilling has allowed us to combat some of that situation a bit.
Barry, I reckon that's where we've got to be a bit careful how we analyse our weather trends. You showed us a rainfall graph, much trend in it, but that is your trend. It's same with us. If we look at average rainfall, it doesn't change much. If we break up into winter and summer, the trends are So we just have to be carefully pulling it apart a bit more, I reckon, as farmers.
When the fundamental point here is that we have to respond to that temperature increase. If we don't, we don't know about rainfall. I mean, it's, you know, a bit nebulous. But if we don't respond to that rainfall, that temperature change, then we've got problems.
That's what the science is saying about the temperature, but they're certain about
the other really significant response has been summer weed control. I mean, and it's really closely tied up with what Greg was talking about. But basically, in our environment over there, we've now, over a period of, say, basically, I think broadacre glyphosate was started to be used there in about 1996 or something like that. And since then, basically, over a period of time, the whole district now is on zero tolerance summer weed control. In our environment, where we store water relatively easily. In these environments here, on these heavier soil types, we're having a bit of a problem, but it still has a really important impact. And Greg showed you some of those things. We have to be able to pull, any opportunity we can pull moisture from outside of the season into this limited growing season rainfall is just absolutely critical to how we survive.
Given your risk strategy, are you doing it from the start, or are you valuing the later moisture more and attacking harder later, and you put that against weeds you have hardly killed properly at the first go, or you don't, and then they get big and you can't do them?
Yeah, well, I mean,
you want to nail the moisture.
It's what you can do in terms of what, you know, if you've got a stunted weed that's absolutely stuffed for moisture, then I don't bother going spraying. It's not doing any damage anyhow. It might be, but I can't kill it. Or maybe I can with a bit of group steel or something.
About 2 months later, when you've got your rain, you won't.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but essentially, we are trying to adopt a process that if we have a weed in the landscape we can kill, we go and kill it. And in a year like this, it's really good. Sorry?
Total weed control.
That's what we try, and we're going to have to go to weed seeker technology, I think, to do that properly. Where else would I think I'm just about? Oh, that's right. This tactical stuff. That's got to make the point about the tactical stuff. This tactical stuff, what I talked about here, this moving into this risk area, into this tactical area, is absolutely, I think, the reason why these farming systems actually survive very well. Because we are able to some extent, do some predictive stuff. And the normal thing is around, the normal thing we talk about is around agronomy. We all know about predictive agronomy. We know that if we've got a big weed burden, we can predict it's going to have an effect on our yield, so we can control our weeds, or diseases, or pests, or nutrition. And these environments have always done it very well on the downside. They'll pick a drought coming. Anyway, my father could, he would just shut up shop. He just knew when a drought was coming, just shut up shop. And that's why they did so well in this variable climate. But what they didn't do very well, what we haven't done very well in the past, is to come up with these predictions where we can actually grab those really good years. And that's the stuff that we now are starting to recognise how important soil moisture is in that system. And we're starting to try to sort of pull that into our decision-making processes. So once we've got soil moisture, we then try to use it. Now, there's an enormous amount of difficulties around that system, because one of the problems is that the impact of what we do now is going to have so much of an impact into the future. So what we actually do now with our farming program, if suddenly in 2 months' time I've got a bucket load of stored soil moisture, so I said, yeah, okay, I'm going to go and sow the whole farm. That's going to have an impact as we go forward. It's going to certainly, so next year we haven't got a rotation left because I've suddenly sown the whole farm to wheat or whatever it might be. So that's the sort of thing we've got to somehow try to get our head around that and pull that back into the system. And we are doing a lot of complex modelling on that at the moment. But basically, prima facie, if we can basically drive our decision making based on a few of these predictive components, then we should be able to do a lot better. I'll just give you a quick example of that. This is the yield probability curve that was created on my farm. Actually, we did this a bit retrospectively, but we created this. People would understand yield probability curves. Essentially, it's basically in 2006 we had a 100% chance of getting bugger all, a 50% chance of getting a couple of tonnes to the hectare or whatever it might be. In 2007, because of stored soil moisture, we actually had a 100% chance, barring disasters of frost or a few things like that. But basically we had a 100% chance of getting at least a tonne to the hectare, and then if it had rained and got a good decent season, we would have got some pretty good yields. So this is really, again, pushing into this risk area, saying we know right now I've got a pretty good chance of producing a crop this year, so what we did in that year, we sowed the whole farm. We averaged about a tonne to the hectare because it didn't rain the rest of the year, but we did pretty well out of it because prices went to $400 a tonne and a few things like that. But it's this concept of using some predictive capacity that's going to have to become very, very much more important into our decision making. And I'll just finish up on this particular one here. So this is just a little bit of work I've done, doing some modelling work for, this is for Quorn actually, which is a little town up the road. You came through Horrocks Pass, didn't you? But it's a little town up the road there that has a notoriously unreliable sort of rainfall system. And so what I did is I took the Epsom model and just did a 110-year run. So the Epsom model, is everybody comfortable with the Epsom model? Just the computer model predicting using daily rainfall and temperature to predict yield. I did a 100-year run and I said, what would happen if we had perfect weed control at Quorn? If we were really good farmers and we sowed at the first opportunity of the break, we had no limitation of nitrogen, no pests, no weeds, no whatever, just we're really good farmers, you see. Well, this model is anyhow. And we did that. So what would be the impact? And let's look at the plant available. The model tells us what the plant available water would have been at seeding time, and it also tells us when the seeding date would have been. And it says, okay, so then over that last 110 years, if the plant available water modelled at seeding was above average, what would be the results to final yield? And so 55 years it was above average, 55 years was below average by definition. Those 55 years, the model said the average yield, the median yield in those 55 years where plant available water was above average was 2.6 tonne per hectare. When it was below average, it was 0.4. So just at face value, there's an enormous predictive capacity in in where our season is going just by plant available water at seeding. Bearing in mind, of course, this is plant available water at seeding, not prior to seeding. At seeding. We've had our seeding rain. So we've had our summer period and we've had our seeding rain. And of course, when you start looking at risk, the number of years that we get a cook crop when we've got above average plant available water at seeding are rare, and the number of times we get a good crop, are pretty good. So we have this predictive capacity. This is far better than any seasonal forecast, and yet we talk about seasonal forecasts. We've got to get better seasonal forecasts. Well, in this environment here, certainly, the indications are that plant available water is a much better indicator, and you combine that with seeding time, you get a really good indicator of where your season's going. So again, that's allowing us to push into this risk area. And I think that's the area that we just need to focus a little bit more with our thoughts on. So, current area, summing up, current areas research which we're doing as a farming system, I guess, in this area. We're going back and revisiting fallow management, both strategic and tactical. I did a run just last week where I looked at what if we were to revisit, just take on the traditional winter fallow. So take a crop out, only crop every second year. What would be the influence of that winter fallow? At Port Germain it was 0.7 of a tonne per hectare. Now I haven't done the economics on that. I'm not sure whether that'll work or not, but basically as against a summer fallow, taking it back to the previous 18 months if you like, was 0.7 of a tonne per hectare. So it's significant. We need to sort of work around some of the climate change stuff, and again talking about early seeding or varietal choices or whatever, and we're doing some more work. A lot of this stuff is just being done with modelling work and then throwing it back across farmers and saying, what do you think of this? Is this process going to work or not? Changing input levels, both spatially and across time, different seasons and whatever. Optimising the crop livestock balance, because that's a really difficult one, because with lambs at $6 a kilo, it's a very different equation to lambs at say $2.50. We don't know what they're going to be next year, but we're doing a heap of, again, just modelling, sort of just spreadsheet type work, trying to pull all those sorts of things in together. Managing late breaks, I think that's a really important one. What are we going to do in that regard? And farmers already have rules of thumb that they use, but I think we need to sort of try to work on that a bit more, because one of the things that occurs to me, one of the things that the strategies that we use to manage a lot of those things now have been developed over a long period of time, and with climate changing, and probably the climate's changing quicker, then probably some of those strategies are catching up. So I think that's the area that we need to focus a bit on. Flexible grain and grazing, and then possibly some income from carbon. So they're, I guess, areas that we're currently trying to get our heads around and see whether we can basically come up with programs that can take into account the last 10 years and get some better results from those last 10 years, but with the knowledge that we've got no idea that what's going to happen for the next 10 years.
You got any thoughts on replacing farming for carbon trading?
No, it's an area that I try to avoid. I just reckon it's very,
I wouldn't touch with a 40-foot
But look, if suddenly we discovered that these soils were capable of incorporating that stuff, and we need to bring that into the farming system, I just think it's just really about this acknowledging what we're faced with and going through a change process around that. That's all. I mean, I just think too often we just get locked into narrow sort of tunnel of processes. We just have to be really open, particularly in these sorts of highly variable environment. If something works, then start investigating it, see how it goes, and take it, and that's what's happened. It has, the systems have changed so significantly over time to allow us to survive.